Okay, this is Robert Thibodeau of Mayflower Bookshop. MayflowerBookshop.com, my website. Mayflower Bookshop in Berkley, Michigan is a place I hang out. And I would like to share with you like a further step in the idea of the Rosicrucian Hermetic Grail Tarot. It's Rosicrucian because there's a flower. Like when you look at it, now again, I'm assuming that you've read the book Rosicrucian Hermetic Grail Tarot or tried to research it, and that you've looked a little bit at H.P. Blavatsky's Isis Unveiled, perhaps her other books, and Rudolf Steiner, and Manly Haw in Tibetan Buddhism, a little bit of Osho, a little bit of Hermetics and Neoplatonic, and that you've listened carefully and studied a little bit the previous talk number 1 on this subject, Rosicrucian Hermetic Grail Tarot, and you're familiar with the Tree of Life a little bit. You're looking at the picture on my book, or inside the book, or in the last talk. And you see the major arcana of the tarot from the Fool, Magician, High Priestess, Empress, 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. These 11 steps from 0 to 10, and then that's a descent of the soul, where the oneness or the nothingness manifests and incarnates and diversifies in matter. And so you have this idea of the descent of the soul into incarnation, and then the reascent of the soul, working from the 11th major arcana, the Justice card, to the Hangman, to the Death card. Interestingly enough, you see kind of an upside down rose in the Tree of Life here, in the Death card, on the flag end of the man, the whatever it is, Death, riding the white horse. Very apocalyptic. The upside down, there's a key to this whole thing, this Tree of Life going up and down. And one of the keys was the triangle, the hexagon, and the circle and cross. I talked about the upper triad as the Atma Buddha Manas, the truth, the love, and the mind. And then the Doth connection, the great Empress Mother and the Lesser Mother of the Moon, as the birthing of the higher and lower worlds, this kind of transition of Isis, Sophia, wisdom knowledge that moves into the lower 7, which are 2 triangulations down into the circle and cross, or when we transform through kind of an esoteric, rosy, golden metamorphosis, the physical body via the 7 chakras. When we metamorphosize and transform death into rebirth, our whole experience on earth becomes this, out of wisdom, this bridge, rainbow bridge to the higher worlds through the Empress, the moon, up into the kind of Atma Buddha Manas in the sense of the triad. Depending on what we're looking at is what we see here. Like 1 minute we have the triangle at the top, and then we have a 6-pointed star below that. And then with the Justice and Wheel of Fortune, we have like the circle and cross idea. So when you're meditating on the triangle and the hexagon or the cube unfolded, of course, is the cross, and the rose blooms in the cross. So you have this idea that I mentioned in the previous talk of the Empress and the Moon being the top of a triangle, and then Death and Strength on the left, and Temperance in the Chariot being the bottom 2 points of the triangle pointing upward. And then the Tower, Hierophant, Star, and Emperor being the line across a downward triangle that ends up on the Hangman and the Hermit. And here we have the Lovers and the Devil, the synthesis between the spiritual and the material, the love and the form, trying to figure out that purification of the astral body and the soul, the awakening of the spiritual soul. So again, we have the upper triangle, the six-pointed star. The six-pointed star, the hexagon, if you draw lines around the side and then draw a point at the center, you have the idea of, in other words, the sphere of the star and the emperor. There's a line that goes to lovers and devil. And the tower and Hierophant, there's a line that goes to lovers and devil. But around that six-pointed star is a hexagon, which is like kind of like a cube. You see that Y. The cube is there with the kind of like an image of a Y in the center. And that Y is the tower, Hierophant, with a line to lovers and devil, the star and emperor with a line to lovers and devil, and a straight line down to the hangman hermit. So here, see, we have the hexagon and the interlaced triangles of spirit and matter forming this hexagon is a cube. And when you unfold the cube, you have 4 squares going up and down vertical and 3 across, and that's the cross. That's the rosy cross. Spirit and matter, the horizontal line and the vertical, meet in that center point. That's where the rose in the heart blooms, with this kind of balancing act between spirit and matter through the 7 virtues as spoken about by Gaelic Rimshay in his Lamrin, Meaningful to Behold, but especially in Rudolf Steiner's How to Know the Higher Worlds and Its Attainment. There are virtues that open up the chakras, and some people see it as 6 virtues, with the 7th being the prajna, or the emptiness, the selflessness that can grasp the whole of situations, the whole of the universe, everything and nothing, and the mind. Again, this is like kind of a different language that is an articulation of the workings of the soul. And the interlaced triangles is kind of like representative of the soul between spirit and matter, like matter being Malkuth or justice and wheel of life, and spirit being that upper triad of the Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Osiris, Isis, Horus, Father, Mind, Holy Mother, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. There's a lot of different words for this. Atma, Buddha, Manas, universal truth, love, and mind, Manas. And so the Rosicrucian is the idea of the rose blooming out of the dirt. Past the rose rises above the thorn, and the real lovers emerge. The Hermetic side of it is that everything's half revealed and half concealed. Hermes, as above, so below, but it's kind of turned inside out. There's an inner and outer, a higher and lower world that gives birth to a middle way, a middle ground, a child between spirit and matter, the birth of the eon. In this light, every man and woman is a star or a sunshine. The Grail part of it, in the last talk, I talked about the Atma Buddha Manas being the handle, and that the sword is the Empress and the moon and the lovers and the devil. Perhaps the hangman, the hermit, and justice and the wheel of fortune, that the handle of the sword reaches deep into matter. But also we could see the lower 7 spheres of 2 cards being the cup, and then the sword enters the cup. The point being the lovers or the devil, that one has to make a choice whether one's living for life. If one's going to live is evil, the word evil is live backwards, or one is going to devolve and in its proper balance, incarnating and excarnating, spiritual and material, Purusha Prakriti, principal substance. It's a healthy thing. So when we look up and down these dual cards, in the 11 spheres, including Dath, each set of 2 cards, often one card represents the incarnational impulse. It's thought that the tarot is a sacred manuscript for sharing and teaching us the nature of the true nature of the self. Mind, heart, know thyself, and thou shalt come to know the whole world. And part of this knowing the self is this descent and reascent into our moment, our day, our night, our life, our many lives. And so you can, you get this kind of idea that the hangman, well, let's start at the top. We have this idea that the fool is about to step off a cliff and descend. And he's trying to connect the sun with the point of his phalos, phalos, wand. And he's holding a rose, part of the Rosicrucian mysteries. And we have this kind of descent as a magician. You can see holding the wand up and pointing down this connection through the 4 elements of earth, coin, cup, emotions, sword, thinking, wand, self or fire, earth, water, air, and fire. And the magician has an eternity symbol. Or is it a figure 8 laying sideways? And that you have the lower 7, but when you have Thoth, the Empress in the moon, the transformation of the body and blood, of spirit and matter, into the communion of the angels, saints, bodhisattvas, messiahs, the Adonai within us that bridges these higher and lower worlds. Certainly in the judgment card you have an idea of an ascent, but a bugle or horn trumpet, sounding forth from the higher to the lower. You have the mystery of the high priestess holding a secret between the opposites of spirit and matter pillars. Boaz and Jachin, you can say, but you could also say spirit and matter. And the pomegranate behind her is definitely an image of the plenitude or multitude. The pomegranate was a symbol. Persephone ate the pomegranate, and so had to stay in hell with Hades a third of the year, or a fourth, depending on how you look at it. But the point is that the pomegranate represents multiplicity rather than unity. Unity and diversity. This is the diversity. And so it's the mystery of incarnation, the wisdom that is gained through the Torah. And the high priestess is like the virgin that stands on the moon. The moon and the sun right there. And it moves down into the moon card with the Empress's Thoth. The Emperor rules the world. The star is kind of a more spiritual card. The Hierophant rules the spiritual worlds, the Hierophanes. And the tower is this falling into matter from the high spiritual. It's not all bad. Depends on, we fall from the pure fire into the false fires of desire. Here we have desire and hate and anger and fear, and all the non-virtues are the devil, right? And the lovers are all the virtues, where you have a kind of a naked spiritual soul that the inner and the outer have a higher calling, angelic. And this whole idea of number 6 card, of the lover's card, with that angel. Number 6 card is this being the center of the 6 interlaced triangles of the 6-fold hexagon. And in Esoteric Lessons of Rudolf Steiner, Volume 1, you can see the 6-pointed stars being representative of the astral body, the astrology, right? The astral body. The etheric body being a 5-pointed star, which, by the way, you get, when you have the tower and Hierophant, goes down to the hangman and hermit, goes up to the star and the emperor on the right, and then crosses down to the left to death and strength, and over to temperance and chariot, and back through lovers and devil to the Tower Hierophant. That's an upside down 5-pointed star. A descent of the 5 senses, the sense-bound thinking. But then you have the upright star when you can calibrate the transformation of justice and love and the wheel of fortune, that one can rise up and make the turning point in time that Steiner talks about. And that Blavatsky mentions the turning point in time and the Golgotha. And this is a great idea that many people have. And so you have this Empress and the moon as Thoth, as the top of the 5-pointed star. You know, you can imagine that going down to temperance in the chariot, going up to the left, the tower and the Hierophant, off to the right, the star, the emperor, back down to death and strength. You have a 5-pointed star. It doesn't matter where you start, but I mean, you get the idea. You could start with death and strength and go to Empress and the moon and down to temperance, chariot, over to tower and Hierophant, star and emperor. You need to look at the picture when you listen to what I'm saying. So I'm writing this down so it'd be on the picture. And when you're doing tarot card readings, on a practical tarot card reading, whether you're doing the Celtic Cross spread, the 12 card spread of the 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 houses of the zodiac, whether you're doing the one card, a question and just one card, or you pull 3 cards for the inner and outer and the present, the past, present, future, or the inner and outer, and what's up. The struggling 2 with the resolution of the 1, if you have a 3-card reading. But if you pull one of these cards, see, that's the idea of this Kabbalistic approach, is that if you pull one of the major arcana and you look where it is on the tree, you have an idea of what's up. If you pull the Fool or the World, you're talking about the world as this giant conclusion of this journey of 22 cards, where the divine feminine meets the Faust of the Fool or the Parsifal of the Fool, and there's some kind of upbringing and wedding, alchemical wedding, the chemical wedding. And one can be unconscious or conscious of this. An unconscious fool could be pure at first, but then make a bunch of mistakes. The World card could be trapped in doing too many things, and trapped in finished product or never finishing a product. But see, there's this really high level to it. The Fool is the pure fool, and the World is this, wonderful, positive ending to the heroic story of the descent and ascent of the hero. The ancient past is loaded with this descent and ascent. Female Ishtar, Inanna, even Krishna goes into the underworld and back, but there's goddesses that do it. And when you have Artemis, she's like freely moving in the earth realms. And when your thrice greatest Hermes imaged and imagined, all the ancient initiations were 3 degrees. That was it, 3 degrees. In Isis Unveiled, Blavatsky suggests that the Jesuits infiltrated Masonry and transformed 3 degrees into 33 degrees, taking one in circles and giving substitute secrets. And that you never come to the real spiritual teachings, which is one of the reasons why I'm recommending to read Blavatsky and Steiner and Ancient Egypt by Massey and The Anaclipsis by Higgins, and if you want to get crazy, the Urantia book, or Thinking in Destiny, Yogananda's books. But specifically, Rudolf Steiner's outline of occult science, Rosicrucian wisdom, foundations of esotericism, Isis Unveiled and Secret Doctrine by Blavatsky, Key to Theosophy. You'll get this like bigger picture that then you start to realize that these tarot cards are representing these different levels of passage and steps of initiation. Because we could say there's 3 steps of initiation, but then we could say getting all those 3 is like a 4th step of understanding the 3. And you have this 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10, or the 1 and the 0. The 1 and the 0, IAO. You have this idea of the relationship of 1 and 2, or 1 and 0, which makes the 3. So thus you kind of have like a 0 or an emptiness or nothing, calm, abiding space, equanimity, vast, boundless, limitless space that once there's a second, then there's that relationship to the 1 and 2, which is the 3rd. And so this is kind of a sacred mathematics where you get this idea of the world and the fool as combining, and it's like the 3 and the 0, the Trinity and the 0, the true nature of the human being. Everything, nothing in a mind, spirit, soul, body, physical, emotional, mental. And there's something that can behold this. Rudolf Steiner says you have to remember all the time there's someone looking. So whenever you get these cards, like let's say you get the Judgment card, and that's at the second horizontal line. Like when you start these horizontal lines of justice and the Wheel of Fortune as the physical, the Hangman, the Hermit as the etheric, the vitality, levity of the sun, the energy in our body, prana, chi. And then you have death, strength, temperance, and the Chariot as the wrestlings of and the problems of the astral body, the like and dislike, sympathy, antipathy, desire, fear, the purification of desire and fear as the process of overcoming dumb, ignorant suffering, the purification of the astral body. And we get this sense of ego caught between spirit and matter and between the right and left pillars of the Kabbalah. And the lovers and the devil being this ego that's trying to bring together heaven and hell, and the spirit and matter, the underworld and spirit. I mean, mostly we don't understand the underworld. We think of it as the underpants and the unconscious animal instinct, rather than spiritual will, for instance. After the training of the 5 senses and the thinking and the 6th sense of the heart, then we have the training of the will, which that's why the Native American Indian, the ancient Egyptian, and the Mason and Rosicrucian wear these aprons over their lower third, their sex center, will center, digestive of experience center. Really, the heart is the womb of rebirth of the soul. The heart spells earth, the letters spell earth, and the heart is the 3rd ear, where we can hear the true teachings. When we're reading these books, or you're listening to me, you're able to have your own perceptions and intuitive insights and rational mind of these higher and lower levels of consciousness. And so then we move above the lovers and devil, and we move to the lower manas, knocking on the door of the spirit self by this selfless serving of the king or emperor with the land, and those lesser obeying these higher spiritual laws of higher love. That ankh in his hand, for instance. But he's grabbing the ankh not by the circle of spirit, but by matter, see? So there's still this kind of work to do, the great work. And the star, clearly a spiritual being between moving and unmoving, spirit and matter. You know, it's like the serving. The tower is like the lessons of the lower manas when it falls back. Or is it a Prometheus, a bringing of the fire out of compassion? the taking off the crown or the losing of the crown. So every card has this higher and lower octave, like I talk about in my astrology book, Astrology, Astrological Aspects, the Art. I talk about that. Every tarot card, like every planet and aspect, has a higher and lower octave. And so just because a card is at lower manas doesn't mean that it's not operating at an Atma level or Buddhic level or higher manas level. And then we have this higher manas or Sophia wisdom of the purified self-awareness and spiritually awakened Empress in the moon at a higher octave. The moon reflects the sun. The Empress has the sun and the love, compassion for awe within. The whole sky is lit in that golden color. So then we go, so whenever you get a card, you either get that the person is misrepresenting these spiritual or they're at the higher octave. And we could say that within every level of the physical, etheric, astral, ego, lower and higher manas, the Buddhic, universal love, compassion, and the Atmic being a vast oneness that permeates all things and is a nothing to the normal perception. You can read about these things further in those books I mentioned, but I'm just suggesting that when you do a reading, if you get these cards, you're looking at the possibility of a higher or lower expression, and you have to look at the person and talk to the person you're giving a reading to, or intuit or digest that person somehow so that you can figure out what level they're at. And that each level has several levels. I mean, you can be at the physical level operating at the Atmic, Buddhic, higher manas level of the physical. I mean, it gets complicated. It gets as complicated as you'd like to get it, but it's very simple. It's a triangle, a six-pointed star hoping for that center, seventh principle. That's the transformation of the four elements into that fifth Akashic doorway of the circle and cross going into the heart of the matter. So the rose blooms on the cross, but ends up being the rose within the interlaced triangles, and it's the yod or the point that's there and not there in the upper triangle. When we look at the the four suits of pentacles, cups, swords, and wands, we're looking at the pentacle as earthly, earth, and the cups as water and feelings. And, earthly pentacles is money and earthly concerns, right? And cups are feelings and emotions and the feel for the higher feeling for the artistic, intuitive. And the swords is intellect. And swords have a problem because if they're not connected to the major arcana or a combination of balance on the other cards, then the swords end up with a lot of fighting and contesting and arguing and mental, and intellectuality is the booby prize. It's kind of like when you don't have the full experience of the two wings of the soul being the head and the heart. When you don't have that, often intellect alone is like a booby prize where you kind of lose and it's a reflection. So it is the light, though. One can find a higher octave of sun. So anyway, I'm getting a little lost here, but what I wanted to share with you is the idea that when you have these four suits, you're dealing with the physical, emotional, mental, and the ruling genie, so it's either a guiding and a spiritual will, or it's being lost in a wrong will or desire, because it could go just backwards, couldn't it? The wands could be phallic and desire and false power, and the swords can be cutting and critical and divisive and separating. See, to be mental, you have to kind of stand back and look and separate yourself from things. The feelings kind of unite us a little bit, or they can divide too when they're negative and hateful and angry, right? The money can make you materialistic and cut off from the animating principle of fire and breath. Swords can be breath or feelings. They all have a good and bad, higher and lower octave of virtue or non-virtue. And I think that when you take a look at the Ace of Cups and then the King and Queen as the Fool and the World representatives, the King and Queen, wands, of no matter what, fire, earth, air, and water, you have the idea of the aces as being very spiritual, the most spiritual profundity of, form is empty. Look at the Ace of Pentacles. You see like that the spirit hand is holding a coin, and yet when you look at the garden gate, it's like this empty openness. And so the spirit is full and the material is empty and open. I mean, it's like emptiness is fullness, fullness is empty. It's the Heart Sutra. And you look at the Ace of Cups, it's overflowing cup of the Holy Spirit, the spirit of the world entering into our feelings. And the Ace of Swords is an upright sword for connecting the highest achievements of thinking that overspill and fall down into... that created almost another world, actually. But so we have the ace. The ace of wands, of course, is it's growing. Something's growing now, and a consciousness is growing. A diversification is growing, while the oneness is still there. The aces are kind of like the one card, aren't they? The oneness. So these four suits work together, and you see that there's the ace of oneness, and then you have this duality of wisdom with the cups and the king working together, and you have this idea of the knights as being intermediaries between the four elements, and the knights as being intermediary. When it comes to Ein Sof, there's a higher level to the four suits, and especially when you get to the knights, queens, kings, and the aces. And then when you go to the numbers, you could use the ace as that one. And then you go to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. When you go through the numbers, you're going through the Kabbalah again, perhaps. Perhaps we could say that the swords are the very top of the tree of life. And then when it comes to the Buddhic principle, the king and the queen work together, and then the knights become the manas, or the striving for the higher worlds. There's a lot of different ways to look at that, but every time we look at it, we have to decide what is the lower octave that we have to avoid or transmute alchemically the negative into the positive and the gold. That's kind of the job here. So I wanted to say a little more about the tarot in its relationship to the Holy Grail, the Rose Cross, the Hermetic. Hermes is like the universal mind. When you think of the Christ or the Christos or Krishna, the Avatar, the Mithras, you're looking at facets of the universal mind. Artemis, Dionysius, Apollo, Prometheus. You're looking at facets of descent and reascent of the soul that facilitate the soul in its passageway between these 7 levels, 7 steps, like these horizontal lines that rise up 7 times. But we're also looking at the right and left pillar and the middle pillar. And we're also looking at the triangle, the 6-pointed star, and the circle and the cross. Now, my job in writing this book, or sharing the notes from talks in this book, and sharing these talks are for those people who have my book or books and are reading the prescribed books I mentioned earlier, the prescriptions to happiness. Is a prescription to happiness. I mean, what is happiness? It's being co-creative. And all this esoteric, metaphysical, so-called occult knowledge, occult meaning hidden, it's somehow hidden behind the form, the external form is hidden. Astronomical term, that word got wrecked in Hollywood, but really means hidden. So the esoteric side of this is learning some kind of mind that can connect us up with our different bodies and our different levels of consciousness and awareness. Physical, etheric, astral, ego, higher and lower manas, the Buddhic principle of universal love. Our mind and our feelings, our head and our heart being associated with universal love and compassion and universal truth. You see, this is the whole game. That's our higher self. That's what, the better side of John Lennon, the better side of Dylan, the better side of the Beatles, the better side of the Rolling Stones, the better side of Jimi Hendrix, the better side of Bobby Kennedy, the better side of Reagan, the better side of every human being that attempted to shed light on this planet and to raise consciousness or life. Yeah, it's a big thing. And I think the tarot cards are a gift. When the consciousness soul began, that Rudolf Steiner harps on in the 1400s, it's a gift of the ancient wisdom, and that the Templars brought this gift and gave it to gypsies, Egyptsies, yeah, right? They would have fortune-telling games, even though you have to earn your own fortune. It's really a game of divination, of divining the divine within each other, so that we can see each other's holiness and work with that to get through the world, rather than work with each other's neurosis and negative traits and kleshas and klingsors and clinging and attachments and anger and jealousy and lack of concentration and lack of oneness. At one minute we're constantly in a statement of atonement rather than at one minute, and we're looking for a tone, we're looking for a theme and a tone that we could sing the song to. We're looking for like a sounding board. And the tarot cards can be used at a lower level of just elementals that reveal little psychic secrets and what numbers to bet on in your days and whatever. But I think it's got a much higher use. And that is to divine the divine in each other and invoke the angel in the becoming in each other. Do you not know ye are gods in the becoming, your virtues in the becoming, as Jesus told the apostles, and at the end times you'll do greater miracles than I. What are the greater miracles? We're not just healing the blind, we're healing the spiritually blind. We're not just healing people who can't walk. We're trying to heal the divine walk with a spiritual friend. The divine talk and walk with a spiritual friend. We're not trying to forgive and heal sin, though in ancient India the sin being acting out of separateness was the cause of all suffering. But we're trying to find at-one-ment or atonement. At-one-ment is atonement. We're trying to atone becoming at one with the universal oneness that permeates all things, the Word. And this is what brings us to the tarot cards of 22 cards which have this interesting relationship. 22 is 2 plus 2 is 4. And yet, it's a 0 and 21 cards, numbered. So even though there's a relationship of the 4 in the hexagon, interlaced triangles, and the unfoldment of the cube as the rosy cross image, and of course in Rudolf Steiner's Outline of Occult Science, Outline of Esoteric Science, he talks about the rosy cross meditation. Not only that, but you have this relationship of 3 and 4, because you have the 4 as 22 cards, but you have the 3 as 0, and each set is 21, which makes 3. 3 sets of 7. Spirit, soul, body each have 7 levels that make the 21 cards. There's a sacred mathematics that has to go back to Crotona and the Pythagorean schools of mathematics and music. The 7 notes of music, 7 days of the week, the 7 sacred metals, the 7 chakras, and the 8th as being the Sophia Wisdom Empress moon, not the 8th sphere, but the higher octave that resonates the relationship between the higher and lower worlds. We can approach it through the middle way of the heart. We can approach it through the upper and lower worlds, trying to find balance and rebirth out of the womb of the heart. So try to, if you can, listen to some of my meditation talks and get that information of the everything, nothing, and a mind, that trinity. And there's a 4th member that can just watch that. In a way, this is like baseball, right? We get up to bat. In the dugout of the 2 teams that are opposing each other are like the sun and moon, spirit and matter, come together at the home plate, which is a square and a triangle, the relationship of the 3 and the 4. And in certain rituals, that flap will come down and it would be a triangle in the cube, spirit and matter conjoined. This is all in this Kabbalistic mathematic geometry. There's sacred geometry books at Mayflower too that can maybe perhaps help. So you can see how the baseball player comes up to bat at the 5, the triangle and the 4 makes 7, yet when the triangle is sitting on the square, which is the home plate, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have this 5-sided figure. Very interesting. The 5-pointed star, which I talked about earlier in this talk. And you get the bat becomes upright and then makes the sign of the cross when you hit the ball. A swirling cross, the hammer of Thor, the swirl of the involution and evolution, descent and ascent of spirit into matter and the soul. And you go on the 3 bases of existence. So we're going in the 3 dimensions of existence. We're trying to circle. In baseball, you circle the square. You spiritualize the matter. Same with this. We can look at the tree of life here in these 11 Sephiroth or spheres with double cards on it. And we can go straight down, we can go around the side, the left to the right, the down the left and up the right. It depends on what we're up to. I'm saying 11 steps down, 11 steps up, forming the 22 cards of the major arcana, which are 0 and 21. So it's a funny relationship of 3 and 4. And in baseball, you circle the square, you circle the diamond. It's like the Diamond Sutra of the Tibetan Buddhists or something. You go from home plate 1 to the first base, second base, third base, and back home. That's 5. That's 5 places you're at. But it's really going around 3 bases. And the umpires are the lords of karma. The 9 players on the field are the 9 sacred feminine muses. The 9 spiritual hierarchy, somehow from the muses of the feminine, divine feminine Sophia, we go to the men's club. They are often misunderstood as the angels, archangels, archai, exousiai, thrones, dominions, seraphim, cherubim, thrones, like all that they're all guys, right? No, well, I'm just making a little bit of humor here, but so the 9 players on the baseball field with the 10th is the human being hoping to become an angel by circling the matter and transforming the 3 dimensions of existence with the spirit, with the Atma Buddha Manas, the universal truth, love, and mindfulness. And we get back home. The prodigal son story again. It's like Odysseus in the Odyssey gets lost in the first part, a lot of fighting and war. And then the second part of the Odyssey is going home. In Faust, we have the going out and getting lost in search of love and money and knowledge and all that stuff. Goethe's Faust. And in the second half, Faust is redeemed because he keeps following love, and he didn't mean to hurt anybody, and he keeps trying to make the world a better place and redeem land from the sea, redeem consciousness, and help the poor. And at the end of a full life and a certain amount of contentment that he accidentally gets thinking he's doing good, before the whole world's enlightened and they have the smarts he has, he stepped out of evolution. It's kind of a prophecy of our time. People think that because they're successful and have money and a hit record and a movie, they have a successful billion dollar business. They just step out of time. They step out and they think they're content and they have everything they want, and then they die like Faust, and they didn't really help other people to get smart like them, and they didn't really heal the earth of all its toxicity and help bring clean water and air and stop all the wars and the vast greed that goes into the military, medical, industrial complex and the pharmaceutical, oh my gosh. And the insurance and, oh my gosh. So if we take out the greed and profit out of everything that human beings need, we would find out out of religion and out of the war machine. And we'd find out a better world, and unless the rich people do it, it's not going to happen. And the poor people aren't able to educate the rich people, it appears, except for by this rebellion, like a Paris French Revolution or something, or the American Revolution. So how can we find a better way to find peace in the world? And I think that the Templars left their gift of the tarot cards, and this is my argument in my tarot books. Not all my tarot books are out yet, and they're not perfect. They're just rushed out as my notes. But here I am lecturing to those people and I'm not lecturing, I'm sharing these ideas and talks with you who are studying my book, and this idea that there is a spiritual way to awaken our inner life, whether rich or poor, fool or wise, so-called, or smart, rich or poor, inwardly or outwardly. There's a way to awaken a greater participation and gardening talent of each other in souls and backyards. We're awakening. Socrates said that happiness was to awaken a more fuller participation with all of life. And I, Robert Thibodeau, MayflowerBookshop.com, at Mayflower Bookshop, I'm sharing a further step, not only to awaken a more fuller participation with all life would bring happiness, but instead of watching the apocalypse without revelation on TV, we awaken a more fuller participation with the whole of our life and the whole of the earth evolution, and we participate with the future destiny of the earth to make it a better place, And so I think these tarot cards are a really easy way to become psychic and intuitive and have artistic. I've met people that work for advertising companies that just do the tarot cards for creative ideas, or creative ideas in their love life, or their work, or their calling, or their destiny, or their desire. And how you can see that there's higher and lower levels to desire. There's thy will be done, not my will, right? There's let this cup pass from me, but there's also let me incarnate into this and see what I can do by being totally selfless and open-minded to learning. And I, again, think that one of the most important books that Rudolf Steiner read, Manly Hall read, Dane Rudger read, Markham and Jones, all these guys, The Secret Doctrine by H.P. Blavatsky, Isis Unveiled. Almost every idea Steiner had came from there first, and then he elaborated. And I dare anybody to debate me on it. But people just kind of shoot and run and hide and have their own little kingdom come, and they don't really have a going that seems to be good for everybody. But anyway, that was an accident that I said. Forget everything I just said. We're in it together. Let's help each other awaken. This is Robert Thibodeau, Mayflower Bookshop, flowering at you and sharing a cup of tea. Bless your heart. MayflowerBookshop.com. At your higher self service. If you like this, please donate. Please donate so I can keep this stuff going on the internet. Make a donation. Buy my book. Bless your heart. Bless your heart, wise joy.